The steel hook of the tow truck glinted under the streetlights like the jaws of some suburban predator ready to swallow my entire life in one bite. It was 7 a.m. on a bone-chilling December morning in Serenity Grove, the kind of place where everyone smiles in the HOA newsletter, but secretly prays their neighbor doesn't paint their door the wrong shade of beige. And there she stood, Deborah Langford, president of the Serenity Grove Homeowners Association, in her signature pastel blue power suit that probably cost more than my truck, screaming like the world was ending because someone dared to sell handmade ornaments on her plaza. "Get that eyesore out of here now," she shrieked at the deputy, her acrylic nail jabbing the air like a tiny dagger. "This is community land. Regulation 47C clearly states no unauthorized commercial activity that disrupts our aesthetic harmony." I didn't move. I just stood by my hand-built wooden stall, steam rising from my black coffee, watching the chaos with the calm of a man who knew exactly how this movie ended. Because while Debbie thought she was the queen of this little kingdom of lawn police and color-coded trash bins, I knew the dirty little secret hiding behind all those fines and newsletters. My name is Ryan Kessler. And for the last 6 months, I'd been hunting bigger game than a mid-level Karen with a clipboard. The deputy looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, probably regretting the day he drew the short straw for HOA calls. Behind Debbie, lurking like the puppet master he was, stood Victor Lang, the treasurer. Cashmere coat, leather gloves, the kind of quiet smirk that says, "I own you and you don't even know it yet." He didn't scream. He just adjusted his scarf and whispered something to the sergeant. I saw the sergeant's eyes narrow. Classic move. Let the loud one take the heat while the money guy pulls the strings. They thought the flannel shirt, the work boots, and the 3-day beard made me easy prey. They had no idea the guy sipping coffee in the freezing cold wasn't some broke handyman who'd wandered into their perfect little bubble. I was the guy who'd spent 15 years at the Treasury Department chasing money launderers who made these two look like kids stealing lunch money. But to understand why I was standing here letting them try to tow my livelihood, we need to rewind 72 hours. I didn't move to Serenity Grove for the vibrant community spirit they brag about in the welcome packet. I came because numbers don't lie, but people like Debbie and Victor do. 6 months ago, during a routine review of old municipal bonds, I spotted a 0.02% ghost variance in the property tax ledger for this very plaza. A rounding error that had quietly funneled HOA fees and vendor beautification taxes into a slush fund for 3 decades. It led straight here, to the village green, the so-called public heart of Serenity Grove that the HOA treated like their personal fiefdom. I didn't roll in flashing a badge. I rolled in as Ryan Kessler, the quiet new guy who just bought the fixer-upper on Maple Lane. The one they immediately slandered in the monthly newsletter as the bearded drifter whose truck ruins curb appeal. They fined me $250 for non-compliant holiday prep before I even unpacked. I paid it. I smiled. I waved at the security cameras they'd installed for everyone's safety, and I started watching. 3 days ago I rented a trailer, parked it at the edge of the green, and spent 48 hours building the Kessler Holiday Market. Every string of lights hit a high-resolution directional mic disguised as a pine cone. Every payment terminal carried military-grade tracking software. I grid-mapped the electrical load so precisely that any accidental surge would be obvious on my hidden monitors. I even tightened a loose bolt on a rival stall 50 yards away, not because I cared about safety but because chaos offends me. Debbie thought she owned the green. She'd built her marble fountain and her perfectly manicured hedges right in the center and charged every vendor a permit fee to breathe the air. But she didn't own it. I did, or at least the paper I bought at a blind municipal auction for $500 did. The 1928 bond default that had never been paid off. The land title had been collateral forgotten, bundled, and sold. I now held the lien. The plaza, the fountain, the hedges. All of it was sitting on federally protected ground the HOA had been renting out like it was theirs. But I couldn't just wave the deed and walk away. I needed them to commit real crimes on camera. I needed extortion, sabotage, cross-state wire fraud. So I built the prettiest, brightest, most irresistible trap I could think of. A Christmas market opening at dawn. The first clipboard hit my counter like a gunshot. I didn't flinch. I kept arranging my hand-carved wooden bears. It's beautiful, Debbie purred, but her tone said otherwise. Up close her suit was even more aggressive. A synthetic pastel that clashed with every natural thing around it. Her hair was helmet sprayed into submission. Regulation 47C. Unauthorized commercial activity. You have 1 hour to vacate or I'll have the power cut and your inventory impounded. I took a slow sip of coffee. Good morning to you too. I have a permit from the city clerk signed and stamped. She didn't even look at it. She swept it into the slush with one backhanded motion. The city clerk has no jurisdiction here, Mr. Kessler. The Serenity Grove HOA manages this plaza. We protect property values from she looked me up and down, lingering on the sawdust on my boots. Eyesores. Victor stepped out from behind her like smoke. Debbie is passionate, he said softly, almost apologetic, brushing invisible lint from his sleeve. But she has a point. We have standards. However, I'm sure a man of your limited resources can't afford a war with an organization as established as ours. Perhaps a compromise? A donation to the beautification fund. Say $5,000. Cash preferred, but wire transfer works. Funds clear by noon and we can consider this a retroactive permitting fee. Extortion plain and simple, wrapped in HOA politeness. I leaned forward. I don't carry that kind of cash. But I can wire it. Victor's eyes glittered. He slid a heavy embossed card across the counter. Excellent. I waited until they walked away, then initiated the transfer from a Treasury Shadow account tagged with digital markers that would follow every hop to the Caymans. Memo line. Federal evidence. Arrogance really is the best blindfold. By noon the market was packed. Roasted chestnuts, pine scent, kids laughing. Families who didn't live behind the gates were actually enjoying themselves. Debbie paced near the fountain, furious that her kingdom was being invaded. I tuned my earpiece to the mic hidden in the wreath. Victor's voice came through crystal clear. It's a shame about the electrical grid, he murmured. If there were a surge, public safety after all. Just a thought. Debbie nodded and made a call. 20 minutes later a white van rolled up. 2 men in HOA jumpsuits pried open the transformer. I watched the voltage spike on my tablet. They were going to blow the whole thing. I could have stopped it. Instead I let them pull the trigger. Because in my line of work, you let the villains hang themselves. The transformer exploded in a shower of sparks. Lights died. Music cut. Screams of surprise filled the plaza. Right on cue, the fire marshal's red SUV screeched in. Silas Vane, heavy-set, shifting eyes, marched straight to the center without even looking at the transformer. Public hazard, he bellowed. Substandard wiring. Immediate evacuation. Shut it down. Debbie crossed her arms, triumphant. See? This is what happens when you let unauthorized vendors into our neighborhood. Dangerous. Irresponsible. I stepped out of my stall, tablet in hand. Marshal, before you sign that order, you should see this. I turned the screen. We were at 40% capacity stable until 3 minutes ago. This external surge came from the maintenance panel your men accessed at 12:18. I have video. Silas froze. Debbie's face flushed the same color as her suit. That's nonsense. You faked it. Victor placed a calming hand on her shoulder and winked at me. Sophisticated setup, Mr. Kessler. But the marshal has ruled. You can appeal in court. Months from now. Christmas will be over. You'll be bankrupt. The crowd grumbled but started to leave. Silas slapped an orange condemnation sticker on my archway. 24 hours to clear this debris. I watched them walk away, Debbie beaming, Victor already checking his phone for the $5,000 deposit. They thought they'd crushed the little guy. I went back to my trailer and opened my laptop. The money had hopped to a shell company called Vanguard Holdings, Victor's private playground. Then I pulled the 1928 bond documents again and printed a fresh cease and desist citing federal preservation statutes. I barely slept. I knew they wouldn't wait 24 hours. At 2 a.m., Headlights swept across the plaza. I sat in the dark of my trailer watching the monitors. A convoy of private trucks, apprentice towing and recovery, Debbie's husband's company, obvious conflict of interest. She'd rallied a dozen neighbors, feeding them lies about how I was stealing power and squatting. They formed a human chain, looking self-righteous and freezing. Victor stood apart, smoking a thin cigar. He met me halfway. "It's over, son," he said gently. "Debbie has the town. She has the police. She has the marshal. Why don't you sign the title over to the HOA? Give us the inventory. I can make sure she doesn't press charges for the outage. Painless." He held out a clipboard. Transfer of assets. Beneficiary, Vanguard Holdings. He wasn't even pretending anymore. I read the fine print under my penlight. "You don't want the market closed," I said. "You want the land. You found the bond years ago. That's why you're treasurer. You've been bleeding the HOA dry, waiting for the city to condemn the plaza so you could buy the title through your shell company. I'm just a speed bump." Victor's smile died. "I want order, Mr. Kessler. And you are disorder. Sign or Debbie will have you arrested tonight." I handed the clipboard back. "No." He sighed theatrically and nodded to Debbie. That brought us back to 7 a.m. The tow truck backing up, the deputy stepping forward with handcuffs. "Arrest him. Disturbing the peace. Trespassing." I looked the deputy dead in the eye. "I'll go quietly. But first run the license plate on that tow truck. The one backing up to my archway." The deputy paused. "Why?" "Because that truck was reported stolen from a construction yard in Detroit 3 days ago. And the driver is on parole for grand theft auto." Debbie froze. Victor stiffened. The tow driver slammed on the brakes, panic in his eyes. "That's a lie," Debbie shrieked. "My husband owns that truck." "Does he?" I asked. "Or does he lease it from a shell company that acquires assets through insurance fraud?" The deputy reached for his radio. "Dispatch, run a tag for me." Victor stepped forward. "Officer, don't listen to him. He's stalling. Arrest him now." But it was too late. My phone buzzed once, the signal. I put it on speaker. "This is Director Miller, United States Treasury. We are executing the warrant. Secure the perimeter." Debbie blinked. "Who is that?" I reached into my flannel shirt and pulled out the leather wallet I'd kept hidden for 3 days. The gold badge caught the strobe lights. Senior Investigator Ryan Kessler, United States Treasury, Organized Crime Division. "And nobody is going anywhere." The silence was absolute. Then the deep growl of heavy interceptors filled the air. 3 black SUVs tore into the lot, boxing everything in. Agents and windbreakers poured out, weapons drawn. The local deputy raised his hands and stepped back. He knew when the big dogs arrived. I walked up to Victor. "That $5,000 I wired you? Marked bills. Digital isotopes. Deposited into your offshore account an hour ago. Federal wire fraud. Money laundering. And the power cut? Sabotaging a public utility grid is domestic terrorism under the Patriot Act." I turned to Debbie, who was shaking so hard her suit looked cheap. "And you hired a stolen truck to destroy federal evidence. Because this plaza isn't HOA land. It's a federal preservation zone. And I just bought the bond that proves it." Handcuffs clicked. Debbie screamed as they pressed her against the hood of the stolen tow truck. Victor tried to keep his scarf straight, dignity intact, but an agent twisted his arm. The neighbors who'd formed the human chain slowly lowered their arms, mouths open, realizing they'd been pawns. I took a sip of my now ice-cold coffee. It tasted better than victory champagne. The market stayed open. Vendors tentatively plugged heaters back in. The smell of roasted nuts fought the diesel fumes. For a moment I thought the war was over. 3 hours later my secure phone buzzed. "Director Miller. Bad news. A county judge had granted Victor emergency bail. $2 million posted by a shady Delaware holding company. Debbie stayed in a cell, sobbing about her ruined reputation. Victor was already walking free. A black sedan pulled up. Victor stepped out in a fresh navy suit, looking like he'd just come from a board meeting. He bypassed the police tape and met me in the snow. "You made a scene, Ryan," he said levelly. "My lawyers are drafting the civil suit for unlawful arrest and defamation. That transfer was a donation. Entrapment. You have nothing that sticks. But I have something on you." He pulled out a folded photo, me 6 years ago standing next to a witness who later disappeared in Chicago. "Leave Serenity Grove by sunset. Drop the federal holds. Or every newspaper runs the story of the rogue agent who harasses community leaders and loses witnesses. I'll bury you in red tape." He turned and walked away, shoes crunching, certain he'd won. But he made the same mistake Debbie did. He thought I was playing politics. For me this was math. And blackmail is just another variable. I went back inside, locked the door and widened the trace. I found the judge who granted bail, $50,000 retroactive campaign contribution, from Victor's shell company. Bribery. Then I layered old survey maps over modern zoning. There it was. A forgotten Cold War dark fiber trunk line running directly under the fountain. Worth $40 million in leasing rights. Victor wasn't stealing Christmas. He was trying to hijack a national data artery. He'd called an emergency HOA meeting for 6 p.m. Agenda. Dissolve the association and sell the plaza title to Vanguard for $1 to shield it from federal seizure. He was going to burn the HOA down and walk away with the fiber. I put the flannel back on. I wanted him to see the carpenter, not the agent. I wanted him comfortable. The town hall was packed. Residents confused and angry about the raid, and the blackout filled the benches. Victor stood at the podium alone. Debbie still in custody, the perfect scapegoat. "Neighbors, friends," he boomed. "We have been attacked by an overzealous federal agent. To protect our property values, we must dissolve the HOA and transfer assets to a private trust. Sell the plaza title to Vanguard for $1. It's just a formality." He uncapped a gold pin. "Who will second the motion?" I kicked the double doors open. The sound cracked like thunder. Every head turned. "I object," I said, voice carrying to the back row as I walked down the center aisle. Victor's smile twitched. "Mr. Kessler, you have no standing here." "Actually," I said, climbing the stage, "as majority bond holder of the lien on this property, I have the only vote that matters. And I'm not selling." I plugged a flash drive into the projector. The screen behind Victor lit up with the dark fiber line glowing red beneath the plaza. "You aren't protecting the community," I told the crowd. "You're trying to steal a $40 million fiber optic trunk line. You've been sabotaging the plaza, driving up costs, creating fake crises like the power outage so the HOA would be forced to sell to your shell company. Vanguard isn't a trust. It's registered in your name." The crowd gasped. Victor lunged for the laptop cord. Caught his wrist. "Let go," he hissed. "You have no proof of intent." "I have the bribe you paid Judge Harmon," I whispered so only he could hear. "And I have Debbie." He froze. The side door opened. Debbie Langford walked in wearing the same wrinkled pastel suit, released on her own recognizance. She'd heard Victor throw her under the bus on the speakerphone outside. Her eyes burned with fury. "You told me it was for the neighborhood," she said, voice shaking as she stepped to the microphone. "You told me the power surge would just pop a breaker. You didn't tell me you were selling the land out from under us." "Debbie," Victor warned. She turned to the room. "He has a second set of books under the floorboards of his office. The ghost ledger. Every bribe, every stolen fee. Every penny for the fiber deal." Victor lunged at her like a cornered animal, shoving the microphone stand. Feedback screeched. He ran for the back exit. He didn't make 3 steps. I tackled him. We hit the floor hard. He clawed, dignity gone, replaced by pure survival panic. I pinned his arm until he stopped thrashing. "Stay down, Victor." Federal agents who'd been waiting outside swarmed the stage. This time there was no bail hearing. Charges now included attempted flight, assault, and racketeering on a massive scale. They hauled him up, lip bleeding, looking at the people he'd fooled for 20 years. No one offered to help. No one spoke up. He was alone. Debbie sat on the edge of the stage weeping. She was guilty, a willing pawn drunk on petty power, and she would face charges. She'd lose the suit, the reputation, the freedom. But in the end she did one decent thing. She burned the king to save the kingdom. I stood, brushed dust from my flannel, and picked up the microphone. The motion to dissolve is denied. The room erupted in raw relief. The ghost ledger would redirect millions back to local schools. I kept the market open until Christmas Eve, then transferred the land bond to a public trust, forever ending the HOA's illegal grip on the green. On the final night, a neighbor, the same woman who'd once signed Debbie's petition calling me an eyesore, thanked me with tears in her eyes. She finally understood who the real villain had been. Once the rot is gone, I told her, the wood heals on its own. I drove into the dark, ready for the next audit. Tyrants like Victor forget there are people like me in the shadows, carrying a hammer in one hand and a badge in the other. So tell me in the comments, who was really violating the community rules? The man quietly selling ornaments on public land he legally owned, or the HOA president and treasurer who embezzled fees, sabotaged infrastructure, and tried to steal $40 million from under their own neighbors' feet? Was Debbie just a loud pawn? Or was Victor the true mastermind? Drop your verdict below. Justice or overreach? You decide.